Max Verstappen wasn't fastest in Qatar. He didn't need to be. With one brutal call under safety car, he broke McLaren's strategy and Ferrari couldn't even respond.
Subscribe now, because what Verstappen did in Qatar wasn't just a win.
It was psychological warfare. Max Verstappen didn't arrive in Qatar to dominate.
His Red Bull RB21 wasn't the fastest car on the grid.
McLaren had locked out the front row.
Ferrari had brought a revised floor.
The odds weren't in Max's favor, but the outcome? Inevitable.
Because what happened on lap 7 rewrote the script of the entire Grand Prix, and possibly the World Championship.
He didn't need to outpace the McLarens. He didn't even try.
Verstappen watched, waited, and then made a decision so sharp under the safety car that it didn't just win him the race, it exposed the fragility of McLaren's decision-making, and highlighted Ferrari's complete strategic absence.
Max didn't attack with speed.
He attacked with vision. That single call to pit while the race was neutralized flipped the whole grid. Red Bull gained track position without burning tires, without defending on track, and without even running at full pace. Verstappen took control of the race by doing one thing better than anyone else: he acted before anyone else understood what was happening.
The rest? They reacted. Too slow. When the race resumed, Verstappen didn't need to take risks. He wasn't locked in a battle wheel-to-wheel. He simply managed. Tire temperatures. Sector deltas. Fuel flow. Every part of his race was calculated to perfection. His pace wasn't flashy, it was unshakable. And as McLaren faded, and Ferrari disappeared into irrelevance, Max cruised toward a victory that looked calm on the outside but was razor-sharp underneath. Meanwhile, on the Ferrari pit wall, Laurent Mekies stood watching a race unfold that his team wasn't even participating in. Hamilton was deep in the midfield, fighting oversteer and brake instability. Leclerc couldn't hold a racing line through Sector 2. But what stunned Mekies wasn't just that Verstappen was leading. It was how he did it. Quiet. Clean. Ruthless. Red Bull had read the race in real time, while Ferrari had waited for someone else to blink. And it wasn't just the race. It was the message. Verstappen had taken a car that was third best on paper, adapted his driving around its limitations, and dismantled two of the fastest teams on the calendar without ever going to war on track. He didn't just win. He rewrote what winning looks like in modern F1. And in doing so, he reignited a championship that many thought was already leaning orange. So if you're tired of shallow headlines and want the truth behind Verstappen's brilliance, subscribe now. Because what happened in Qatar was more than just a race victory. It was a warning. One mistake from McLaren. One silent race from Ferrari. And Verstappen? He made both of them pay. The Qatar Grand Prix 2025 was supposed to be the confirmation of McLaren's dominance. Oscar Piastri had secured pole position with a stunning lap. Lando Norris was entering the weekend leading the World Championship. The RB21 looked off the pace in all three practice sessions. Max Verstappen himself said on Saturday, "We'll try to minimize the damage." But as the lights went out on Sunday, it was clear Red Bull had one card left to play, and they were ready to use it. Lap 7 changed the entire race. A collision between Gasly and Hülkenberg triggered a safety car. The field bunched. And in that moment of hesitation, just seconds long, Verstappen dove into the pit lane. Hard tires on. Track position sacrificed temporarily. But Red Bull's strategy team saw what no one else did: McLaren's overconfidence, Ferrari's passivity, and most of all, a window to win a race without needing to pass a single car on track. While other teams discussed, Verstappen acted. That's the difference between racing and controlling a Grand Prix. When McLaren kept both drivers out, they committed to a vulnerable position, fast in the short term, tactically boxed in for the rest of the race. When Norris and Piastri finally made their stops on laps 24 and 26, Verstappen cycled ahead, no fights, no wheel-to-wheel. The position was already his. Red Bull hadn't just read the race. They had written it. And Ferrari? Nowhere. Hamilton was stuck behind Bottas in P11. Leclerc was bleeding pace on medium tires that overheated after lap 9. Neither driver had grip. Neither had confidence. And neither had any radio message that even hinted at a recovery plan. Laurent Mekies, watching from the pit wall, didn't just see a race slip away. He saw his team evaporate from contention while Verstappen turned a non-winning car into a race-winning machine. What made Verstappen's control even more chilling was how ordinary it looked. No lunges. No aggressive moves. Just clean exits, tire preservation, and control of pace. Every lap from lap 12 to lap 40 was within a 0.2 window. Verstappen wasn't chasing fastest laps, he was managing the degradation curve. While Piastri pushed and overheated his rear left, Max was already nursing his second stint tires through the high-load corners of Sector 2. Red Bull's execution exposed every weakness in the others. McLaren had the speed, but not the timing. Ferrari had no grip, no strategy, and no trust from their drivers. Verstappen, by contrast, made every phase of the race his, even in a car that still showed limitations through turn 6 and the final sector. The Qatar track punished any hesitation. Verstappen showed none. So when the checkered flag fell, it wasn't just a win. It was a message. Max Verstappen had taken back control of the championship without ever leading in pace. He simply saw the race clearer, acted quicker, and executed sharper. And in doing so, he reminded the paddock, Racecraft beats raw speed every single time. From lap 10 onward, Verstappen's performance didn't resemble domination in the traditional sense. There were no purple sectors, no fastest lap records. But in the world of Formula One, control often matters more than raw pace, and Max executed that principle to perfection. His lap times across the middle stint were stable, lap after lap within a narrow 0.2 window. That's how you kill a race, not with attack, but with rhythm. Verstappen's RB21 was not the fastest car over a single lap. McLaren still had the outright pace in clean air. But the moment they delayed their stop, they locked themselves into a strategy that Max had already outplayed. Once he rejoined after his early pit stop, he didn't need to pass. He needed to preserve the hard tire compound through high degradation corners while the others scrambled to adapt. He did exactly that, and the timing screens told the story. Piastri and Norris tried to undercut each other too late. When they finally boxed under green conditions, the pit delta was brutal. They lost track position to Verstappen immediately and rejoined in light traffic, where tire temps skyrocketed and overtaking required energy deployment they couldn't afford. Meanwhile, Verstappen was in free air, running his race. The strategy hadn't just gained him position, it had insulated him from any counterattack. Ferrari's data was even more damning. Hamilton's SF25 telemetry showed massive instability under braking, particularly into turn 4 and turn 11. Rear tire temperatures were spiking, and brake migration maps revealed inconsistent pressure balance. Leclerc's car suffered from snap oversteer in low-speed corners and couldn't maintain lateral grip through Sector 2. While Verstappen cruised in clean air, Ferrari's drivers were stuck managing a car that wouldn't respond to inputs. What made Verstappen's drive even more impressive was how little he relied on DRS or traffic manipulation. Red Bull timed his release into free air perfectly after the pit stop. From lap 12 to lap 30, Verstappen had no one in front of him, no battles to fight. That meant consistent airflow, stable tire temps, and total pace control. His engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, gave updates, but Max didn't need pushing. His inputs were already perfect. Even on aging tires, Verstappen's corner entry speeds were only marginally lower than McLaren's on fresh rubber. How? He adjusted mid-corner throttle to shift weight forward, rotated early, and sacrificed a bit of apex time to save the exits, especially in turn 8 and turn 10. Those micro-adjustments created a tire life advantage that McLaren never saw coming. Piastri pushed hard to close the gap, but by lap 39, his rear grip had collapsed. Norris followed the same trajectory. By the final stint, the truth was obvious. Verstappen had weaponized the limitations of his car and turned them into tactical assets. He wasn't faster, he was smarter. The RB21 may have lacked peak downforce and mechanical bite, but in Verstappen's hands, it became a race-managing scalpel. McLaren brought a hammer. Ferrari brought a calculator. Max? He brought timing. And that's what won him Qatar. The RB21 wasn't balanced in Qatar. That was obvious from the moment Verstappen hit the track in FP1.
The car showed a clear bias toward understeer in slow corners and an unstable aero platform in high-speed zones, especially turn 6 and the double apex turn 12. The rear wouldn't bite under load, and the front lacked mid-corner rotation. For most drivers, that's race over. For Verstappen, it was just data to process and work around. Red Bull engineers made a risky overnight change between qualifying and the race. They adjusted the rear ride height and slightly increased torsion bar stiffness. The car didn't suddenly become quick. It became consistent. Verstappen now had a platform that was predictable under braking and less reactive through direction changes. That's not the kind of setup that wins on sheer speed, but it's the kind that lets a driver like Max do damage with patience and control. Verstappen's driving style became even more technical than usual. His brake traces showed earlier but more progressive pedal application. Instead of using sharp deceleration to rotate the car, he leaned into smoother load transfer. This allowed the front tires to engage without overloading the rear, especially through the long radius corners where degradation spikes. The goal wasn't to carry more apex speed. It was to make the car live longer. And it worked. Throttle traces tell the rest of the story. Max reduced his early throttle commitment out of turns 5 and 10 by over 10% compared to qualifying. That slight hesitation preserved the rear tires through critical traction zones, allowing him to stretch the first stint deep into the race window. McLaren, by contrast, was pushing with both drivers. They were faster but not for long. Their tires began to fall off, and Verstappen still had grip in reserve. Verstappen's interaction with Lambiase over radio was minimal but sharp. "Oscar gaining in Sector 3, his engineer said. Max replied simply, "Copy. I'll cover it next lap." No emotion. No panic. And when Piastri did close the gap, Verstappen responded with controlled pace, not a defensive push. He didn't defend his position with the car. He defended it with race architecture. Every corner, every exit, every fuel mode was calculated to prevent any window for McLaren to strike. What made it even more impressive was the fact that Verstappen had no real DRS to use, no tire offset to play with, and no mechanical advantage on corner exits. His win came down to the perfect blend of precision and restraint. By lap 35, the RB21 was no longer underperforming, it was outperforming expectation. Not because the car had improved. Because Verstappen had transformed its behavior through micro-level driving decisions most fans never see on TV. In Qatar, Max Verstappen didn't show raw dominance. He showed intellectual supremacy behind the wheel. With a car that was flawed, a setup that wasn't optimal, and rivals who were technically faster, he didn't just survive, he rewrote the race. And for engineers like Laurent Mekies watching from Ferrari's pit wall, the message was devastating. If Verstappen can do this with a compromised car, what happens when Red Bull gives him a perfect one?